All right, good afternoon for everybody that's joining us here for this webinar, and good morning to anybody that's out there on the west, still coming up on the noon hour. What we're going to cover today is the Bosch PLENA Matrix from our commercial audio solutions. I'm Preston Stevenson, Marketing Manager for North America for both conferencing and public address, and we have two other team members here that'll be joining us today. First one, which you guys can most likely see video of, is AJ Peterson. AJ's been with us since 2011. He covers training for North America, as well as support for customers and design. And then also we're going to have a little bit later in the presentation, Ben Geving join us. He's been with us since 2004, and he will be going a little more hands-on from the application design side and kind of what we can do within the PLENA Matrix software GUIs and those types of things. So if you do have any questions as we move through the presentation, feel free to put those into the chat window, and we'll do our best to get them all answered as we move through the presentation. So with that, I will hand it over to AJ to get going.
Great. Thanks, Preston. And hello. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for taking time out of your day to join us on our meeting, our webinar about PLENA Matrix from Bosch. Like Preston had said, I'm going to go over kind of some bigger picture stuff, kind of where this product fits in the market, how we market it, where we see it fitting, and then dive into the actual components of the of the system. Talk a little bit about that, and then I will later on hand it over to Ben, who's gonna walk you through the web GUI itself and really show you kind of the end user experience there. So I will start. I'll share my screen quick. All right. So starting out, just big picture, you know, Bosch is a huge company. We do a lot of things, and you know, you might know from appliances, power tools, automotive, and furthermore, we belong in kind of what we call our safety security department, and that breaks up into fire systems, access control, intrusion systems, security systems, and then the two little pie slices that are safety break up into fire and public address. So if you take public address and then break that up into a pie chart on the right, you'll see we have several different brands that are owned by Bosch. The Telex and RTS is your dispatch systems, aviation systems, and professional broadcast intercoms. Dynacord and Electro Voice is professional sound with microphones, amplifiers, DSPs, and loudspeakers. And then up on the kind of greenish pie chart, you have public address and commercial systems. And of that, PLENA Matrix fits in the public address wedge, our pie chart there. So big picture, that's just kind of where we sit in the world of Bosch. And public address, right? So I always like to just start kind of define it. What is it? It's the only slide I'm actually going to read word for word, but public address is products and systems with the prime focus on broadcasting announcements to advertise, inform, guide, or alert a large public. They are also integrated with voice alarm functionality and can be used sometimes as effective evacuation during an emergency. And of course, the system doubles as audio distribution and background music and program music. We often kind of say when everything's going great, you know, an evacuation system is just a background music system to you. And you've seen these at every airport or cruise ship and places like that you've been in. So that's kind of what we define public address as. And then market-wise, where this fits and how we use them are kind of split into two things: is background, music and paging, and life safety. And of course, all of these market segments have gray areas and blur, and sometimes the system does all of the above. But where we see our four kind of breakdowns of market segments is starting at compact and easy. This is going to be the systems where it's strongly price driven. Sometimes, you know, the cheapest bid will win, you know, most of the time. So this is going to be very simple to use, not a lot of programming, not a lot of installation, very end user friendly. And you'll see these at, you know, a small coffee shop, in office lobby, or something like that. Mainstream is kind of our everything we run into. I'm thinking more like a school, a college campus, a large shopping mall where we're still doing public address, and it is a large scale background music system, but now we might be adding some TV programs, a lot more zoning, a lot more area. We might add a phone interface so I can make pages from a telephone. And of course, you'll see that, like I said, any hotel, office, college campus. On the higher end, we kind of see the scalability and integration. This is going to be our strictly a life safety system. And yes, it still might have background music like on a cruise ship. But, you know, if you look at like an oil rig, an offshore oil rig, or a power plant, at that point, they have no interest in background music, right? This system, regardless if it's got background music or not, its purpose is to save your life in case of an emergency. And then we have the ambient and experience segment. And to me, this is a restaurant. This is where this system's focus is to provide an environment, an experience when I'm dining or, again, at a coffee shop, or even at that cruise ship where certain zones might be entertainment zones where I'm seeing a performance or something like that. So those are the 4 breakdowns. And like I said, they all kind of blur. And where PLENA Matrix would fit in these, to me, it most of the time will be in the ambient and experience. We've done a lot of features that really make PLENA Matrix kind of a cool system, I guess, where it has features that you're going to see where it is providing background music and basic paging and announcements, but its focus is to make the environment a good experience. And I do feel it blurs somewhat. I mean, you could put PLENA Matrix in compact and easy. It might not be the cheapest one in that market, but it could fit there, and it could also fit in mainstream, depending on the size. And we'll get more into that in a second. So of the Bosch portfolio, I just wanted to show you our PA offering. So we have that PLENA Easy, which would be the compact and easy. Then we go to PLENA Matrix, and that's providing that experience or that ambient. We feel Pavero is kind of a mainstream, a very large scale system, but not quite to life safety. It has some features, but not completely focused on life safety. And then our Presidio is strictly, it can do background music, it does the paging, it does all that, but its real focus there is for life safety to evacuate a large area. So this is kind of where PLENA Matrix sits in the Bosch portfolio and in the marketplace. So now I'll dive a little deeper into PLENA Matrix, our feature of today's presentation. And what you're going to see here is, you know, what I kind of said, compact and easy. There's only 5 devices in, or 5 SKUs in the product offering, which I think is great. It's extremely easy to design, extremely easy to install. So we're going to be at a very friendly price point because of those factors. There's a very powerful DSP built in, a ton of DSP in this. And then the other great aspect that we kind of sticks out is, of course, wireless control with an iOS device, so your iPad or iPhone, or PC software, so you can control with a tablet. So both kind of platforms there. And also that we took a lot of green initiatives with this, that it has a smart capability to go into standby and go into an idle mode. So if it's at night and no one's in the store, the amps can go to sleep and we're saving energy. So as I said, there's 5 products in the family. We have our main DSP matrix, 2 amplifier offerings, a 125 and 220, an 8-zone call station, and a wall control panel. And I should mention, PLENA Matrix is an 8-zone system as well. So if we look at the DSP, the front panel, nothing's actually, these are really just indicators. We did this on purpose. So kind of in a lot of these systems, we see where the end user might be their own worst enemy, where they might bump something or fiddle with something, and then they have to place a service call. So we have a lot of indicators here to see the health of the system and what's going on, what input's coming in and out. But we didn't want to have physical buttons that someone could essentially make a mistake and screw something up. On the rear, our kind of I/O and a couple things I really like about this. So obviously on the left is just our standard power cord. Then you see two RJ45 jacks, which are amp link outputs. We'll talk a little bit more about that going forward. And then we also have line outputs. And I like that because we did this on purpose. Obviously, you certainly can use a PLENA matrix amplifier, and we certainly encourage it, and it's a smart connection between the two. But what if it's an existing system, or you have some amplifiers, or I don't know, maybe you need a 1,000-watt amplifier because one zone is going to be a little bit more focused on live music. We gave you those regular Euro block line outputs, and then also, of course, TRS and XLR combo jacks for inputs, and then what we call RCA connectors for BGM inserts. And on the right Euro block, you have in two tones. In some countries, you could use this as an evacuation system. It depends on your local fire codes. We don't see it used in the US very much as a true life safety system, but it does have the ability to play some emergency evacuation tones. But I think more importantly, it has the balanced line input for an active override. So if I hit that with a relay or a PTT mic, I can override anything that's happening and take priority. Ethernet controls, obviously, to program it. And then again, dual RJ45s on top of each other for the wall panel controls and the call station controls. I'm not going to read all of these, but this is essentially showing on the left the configuration features. These are the things I can control in the software. I have control of all of this DSP and zoning and compression and EQ and levels and a full mixer and all of that. I can set up presets or scenes. And then on the right is what you would see as the user features. So, you know, an integrator might program all of this, tune the system, zone it out. Everyone's happy. It sounds great. And then you set up a user GUI that someone can walk around, say, a bar restaurant and change the sound system from, you know, background music to a football game that's coming on, for example. So I can mix just on my iPad. Two amplifiers, same as the controller. These are just indicators showing leveling or showing faults. If something overheated or there's a short circuit, I could have a fault indicator. Excuse me. And then on the rear, like the controller, we gave you, you know, independent, obviously speaker outputs, but independent inputs. So the amplifier also has its own DSP engine. So I get more features with the controller. I obviously get the wall controls and the call stations, but in short, for a very reasonably offered price, I could just buy an amplifier and then say plug in a call station or a PTT mic and make an extremely budget-friendly paging system and background music system just off an amplifier and a couple microphones and speakers for a smaller location. Of course, each output you can do a 4 ohm, 8 ohm low impedance output, and certainly has 70 volt and 100 volt if you're in Europe. So we give you all of those options to use with or without the controller and with or without certain third-party gear. I'll go to that next slide. And then, of course, you know, individual attenuation there at the bottom. And again, that amp link input that I'll talk about a little more. And Euro block and XLR combo jacks. So features here, same as with the controller. On the left is what I can configure in the software. And it's kind of, if you're used to using DSPs, these are all kind of standard stuff you've certainly seen before. One I think is kind of cool that we do have delay. So, you know, that's sometimes a little more of an advanced feature at this price point to include speaker delay in there. And then that auto standby setup and an override setup as well. So we could have a high priority. And then the user features that my end user are going to use is simply on, off, and volume. Most of them are going to be using volume, just turning the system up and down. Just letting you know, Bosch is obviously a global organization, so this does have a universal power supply and can work in anywhere in the world. Amplink that I mentioned. So if I'm going to intelligently connect the PLENA matrix amplifiers, we just stacked two RJ45s that are going to just daisy chain. Not daisy chain, but I just jumper them to my 2 amps. It's an 8-zone system, so I use, you know, a full system would be 2 4-channel amplifiers. and that simply connects like any other RJ45. I just plug them in, amplifier is done. It has all of my control and intelligent changes that I'm making, and simple as that, nothing too complex about it. And then of course, each device also has an Ethernet jack for the software control. So, and they have all of them because keep in mind, we set this up so I can use any component individually. That's why we added that connector on the amplifier as well. It doesn't have to have a controller. It's just how many features you want with it. And then we also use, again, standard Cat5 for our wall control panels and our call station. So we're keeping everything extremely standard and simple, no custom wiring, no custom connectors, just Cat5. The distance, you want to keep the components within 5 meters of each component if the jumpers, and then for the wall controls, and I'll talk more about this later, the wall controls and the call stations, you have 500 meters to work with, and you can daisy chain those. So plenty of room there as you deploy this throughout the building. PLM-8CS is the call station. Again, an 8-zone system, capacitive touch buttons for the zone selection. And then we just want to keep a paper label insert that just kind of keeps costs down and allows you to change that very easily. So you can make your labels of zone 1 or front office, back office, however you want to zone it. And then a mechanical push to talk button. As far as, so I'd said we can run a 500-meter daisy chain of call stations, and each call station has a dual RJ45, and you need to address them. They need to have an ID, right? So you can't have duplicate IDs, and we just put little dip switches. So if call station 1, all 3 dip switches would be off, and so on, to give each call station its unique ID so the system knows which one is talking to it. Call wall control panels is the same exact thing, RJ45 connector. It also has dip switches to give them an ID. What's cool about the control panel is, let's say I have a really large room and I want 2 control panels in 1 room because I want to be able to, change that zone's input from 2 different locations. I can duplicate ID them. So if I put 2 wall control panels as ID 4, for example, they would be identical. They would control the input source and volume for the same zone in 2 different locations. Front panel, just kind of showing you what it looks like. Again, this is, I'm selecting my BGM sources, or I can select the zone they're going to, or what input. It's kind of can be a miniature 4-channel mixer if you wanted it to be. The only note there is saying the volume buttons are in 3 decibel steps as most items, but the LEDs are in 6 decibel steps, just because, 2 volume presses up, 1 LED will light up, just as kind of a note. And I kind of mentioned that, same as the wall control panel, we have dip switches, but you can, of course, do duplicate ones to have them control the same thing. And then the wall control is also a mode. It's either going to be a BGM mode, where I'm toggling between the sources, what source goes into this zone and volume, or in mic line mode, I toggle between the 4 mic line inputs, and now I've created a small 4-channel mixer. So I can actually mix my inputs from a wall control panel. And of course, all of these functions are in the software that we're going to go over in a little bit, but this is just kind of the hardware, the end user pieces of it. I like to point this out. I mean, sometimes people forget installation costs. Really easy to install these. You simply screw that top picture there, you screw onto the wall, and then the box just clicks in, and that's that. And you can very cleanly hide the Cat5 cable in the wall. You can move them, just keeping it simple. You don't want anything where I have to cut holes and do all sorts of work, because that is all labor and that all costs money. And then, of course, to pop them off, that's just a little flathead screwdriver. I can pop that, and that wall control panel will come right off. As far as what we're using is RS485 is the protocol we're using for control. And I'm sure most people have heard of it. It's been around a very long time. Our only kind of one note here is obviously a lot of third-party products. we get asked a lot, can other third-party RS485 products be in this daisy chain? And we would say no. This daisy chain is for call stations and wall control panels specific to the PLENA Matrix product family. And as I mentioned, you get 500 meters to work with total, all Cat 5, and you can have 8 wall controllers and 8 call stations, and the system's an 8-zone system, and we have 8 amp channels, so the key number there is 8, and it's simple to remember, simple to use. Same with the wall controller. You can have 8 in the BGM mode, 8 in the mic line mode, and just saying the wall control trunk is for wall controllers and the call station trunk is for call stations. You can't mix and match the trunks. The 2 amplifiers we offer are 120 by 4 and 220 by 4. And quite often someone say, I want more than that. So you can bridge the amplifiers since they're 4-channel. Down at the bottom, it shows the 3 configurations, right? It comes standard at 4 by the 220, but I could bridge that to 440 to 2 by 440 if I wanted, or I could do a 120 amp to 2 by 220 if I wanted. Or if you, again, say you needed something much larger, we could just use an output of the controller and go to a Dynacord amplifier and some Electro Voice speakers if you wanted. Amplifier inputs and loop through. Like I said, it's XLR. It's 4 XLR TRS combos and a Euro block, so we kind of give you the options. And those are wired in parallel, so it's one or the other. It's not, 4 Euro block or 4 TRS. You don't want to put 8, or you're just, bolting those together and we'd overload them. I mentioned earlier the standby mode. I can program the amplifiers to go into standby mode, or I can trigger them via the software or a contact closure or a third-party device. What I like, and I see a lot of people using, is we can just get a Bosch motion controller and program that. So just based, and then the system, I can say a delay. If nothing is happening, the default is 30 minutes. If I see no motion in this area for 30 minutes, put the amplifiers to sleep. So I don't ever have to worry about turning this on or off, or that I'm just completely wasting electricity. And I mentioned the override and emergency tones. As I said, we've done a few of these systems in Latin America that did work for the evacuation system. Their fire code allowed it. What I see the most in the US is that we're taking a relay from the fire system that is overriding us and either muting us or rebroadcasting the fire alarm system's message. That way we're compliant to our local fire codes. But again, it's a global product. It simply matters what your local fire codes are and then how to make it work for you. Right. So that is the quick overview from me. If you have any questions now, you could certainly ask them or type them in the chat. Otherwise, Ben is going to take over and show you the web GUI a little bit, and we'll take questions at the end.
Perfect. Thanks, AJ. It's Preston still. We do have one question. Maybe you can answer this one before we move over to Ben. Can AmpLink sit on an existing IT Ethernet infrastructure with other IT and AV traffic, or does it need a separate network?
So it's RS485, so the answer would be no. It would be its own trunk. We're essentially just using the Cat 5 cable. It's not a true Ethernet protocol. So no, it would be its own trunk.
I think
perfect.
You're asking about AmpLink, which would be analog audio versus RS485 for the control.
Yep. All right, Ben, I'm going to throw presentation rights. All right, it looks like you are live, Ben.
So what we're looking at here is the front end for the PLENA matrix system. Let me get my headset turned down here. Hold on, myself. All right. So I got the front end for the PLENA matrix system here. Right off the bat, we can do a device scan for the system. It uses Bonjour to search for targets. If you have a specified address, you can enter in an IP address directly into the system rather than having it do the scan. But we'll go ahead and scan the network here, and I've got a demo matrix here. I have an option to read or write to the device. I'm going to go ahead and read at this point. And there's an option to change details where I can tell it to use DHCP, a static IP address, and I can also give it a name. Go ahead and do a read. All right, and right now you can see that we're live. The audio that you're hearing right now is actually coming through the PLENA matrix system. I've got zone 1 defined as my left channel and zone 2 defined as my right channel. To look at what is connected in the system, we'll go ahead and look at the RS485 status. And we can see here that I've got 2 different control panels that are live. I've got one with ID 1 and one with ID 2. If you were to look into the programming guide, you'd see that I've got it as the line input or BGM source selections for zone 1 and line selection source BGM for zone 2, which is ID 1 and ID 2. So see that, can you? No, I just noticed that. It's all gray. All right. Anyway, and I've got a call station which is live as well. So first things first, inside the system is basically our channel and zone names. There's ability here to separate out the zone names and the output names and name them independently along with the inputs. And part of that is because we can tie outputs together. If I was to have my output 3 be my tops for a bar system, and this be my subs, my bar, outputs 3 and 4, I could then designate both of these outputs into the bar zone at that point. And then later on, when we're back at the home, I can go through how to set that up, how to change these zone associations. As far as inputs, I've got my announcer microphone that I'm speaking into. I've got my other 3 available inputs. I've got a local radio station tuned in here on BGM 1, which is the RCA input 1, a music stream input, and then a CD player. That's my inputs here. From the main page, I've got access to all of the mixing and all of the routing for each of my 8 outputs. You can see here's my left output. If I select my local radio stream, now we've got our local radio stream mixed in with my live audio microphone. I can do the same thing for my right channel and mix in the music stream instead. Full matrixing. Go into our control panel setup here. There is a new version of firmware that I'm running right here. For those of you who are a little bit familiar with PLENA Matrix, you may notice some extra variables on the right that are available. The wall controller panels, typically they were 3 dB steps in each of the button presses. That's been changed in this new release, which is coming out very soon. We'll give it a max volume control that the panel can raise the level to, along with the range and the amount of steps, the amount of dBs per step. So we can lower this down to 1 dB per step for each of these 2 control panels. Give me a range of, say, 20 dB if I don't want them to go down, or say 40 dB. And then set my max volume, say, of, let's see, minus 8, we'll say. So now my 2 control panels only have the ability to basically route music and control volume where I set the parameters. Another thing we can do here is restrict which types of selections are available on the control panels. You can remove BGM selections from them, making it so they cannot route music into those areas. Our call station setup, we can choose whether or not we want to have a pre-chime active or not on all of our calls. In here, we can do some zone grouping. Right now, I've got button 1 associated with zone 1 left, button 2 to 2, 3 to 3, and on and on. If I wanted to create an all call, essentially all you need to do is just select multiple zones at the same time. And now button 8 is selecting an all call essentially. There is a bit of priority in the system. There's only 4 levels of priority, but it is at least something. So if you have multiple call stations, you do have the ability to at least get some amount of priority for different call stations. Pre-chime on and off. I'll go ahead and turn the pre-chime off since we'll be doing a live page. I'll go ahead and test that out right now. Into zones 1 and 2. Check 1 2 test. Check 1 2. This is actually, I've muted my my presentation microphone on the microphone itself. So this is basically just going through the call station itself at this point. So the next thing we have available is ducking setup. It will do ducking on inputs for XLRs. So you have a couple thresholds in here that you can use. If I have BGM running through my RCA inputs, I can essentially tell it to duck my RCA fed BGM whenever something comes in on an XLR input. Or does page duck the mix, basically, the output to a zone. Thresholds down below. These are basically separated here, my paging ducker level here, and then my BGM level, how far I'd like to duck the music, how long I'd like to hold that duck after the page has overridden it, and then the ducker depth. Overrides and tone setup. This is a little bit different since this is a new firmware as well. We have the ability to mute specific zones, which is an ability that we couldn't do with the older firmware. Basically, when an override comes in, we can route the override audio into specific zones while muting other zones. Just a bit more of a little bit more of a selection available there for configuration. Label maker tools. If you're making labels in the system, essentially you're printing right from the application itself. Quick print here, and what AJ was talking about, where you can create your own labels. This will basically print them with all black and leave the white portions of the text unprinted, so you've got a kind of a black on black look when you're looking at the call station itself. The system's capable of storing 5 presets. All of the presets are an exact snapshot of the system at the time that you created the snapshot. So if I store a preset here as preset 1, essentially all of my DSP settings, all of my routing settings are saved within this. And if I recall that preset, essentially it's every single setting. If I've got certain inputs at certain levels, routing at certain things, it's a full recall of that preset, basically. It's a snapshot of the settings. All right, take a look at our DSP setup. We've got our inputs on the left here. I've got my announcement microphone. Here's our first 4 are our XLR line or microphone inputs. Our 3 BGM inputs down below, and then our call station, all of them summed into one as far as EQing and compression goes. Looking at our key EQ curves here. There we go. Full line of standard EQ options. A right click on the EQ that you're working with will allow you to adjust the queuing for that EQ, and this is live, so you should be able to hear some changes here going out live since I'm working with the announcement microphone. There is the ability to copy settings as well. If we have a EQ set up within a unit and we'd like to copy that over to other outputs, you do have the ability to copy. See? Oh, I guess while I'm displaying, it does not like that. Sharing. That's odd. Delay built in. These can be in feet or meters. We're able to input these parameters. Our compression and our limiting available here. It gives you a live feedback based on the amount of reduction it's currently doing. So you do get that live. And then our output, which you do have the ability to invert the polarity of the output. In the middle here, you'll see zone 1 through 8 is listed here. Basically, we talked about zone 1 being left, zone 2 being right, and then my top and my subs for my bar, both of those are going to have to remain within zone 3. Essentially, so if I do a page into zone 3 at this point, I'll go ahead and do that live so we can see it on my mic here. Choose zone 3. Check 1, 2, test, test. There we go. As my call station's going, and test, test, test. Check 1, 2. Zone 4 is not going. Just zone 3 is perfect. Just the bar. My outputs 3 and 4. If you could see my amplifier, they are lighting up at this point. You can't obviously see them, but as far as locking the system up, you do have the ability to do an administrator password. There's a hardware password and the software password. They are separate. We do this because if you install the PLENA Matrix application, basically you have full access to it unless you've got some administrator passwords locked in there. Definitely recommend those. And that's about it as far as the software itself. We do have a global access. Sorry, I've got something in the way here. We do have a soft standby and a global mute available as well. That allows us to do a full mute. Let me go ahead and now we're back. And then a soft standby, which I'm not going to do, but that will basically put my my matrix into a standby mode, a full standby power save mode. I'll go ahead and log out of this, and then I will log into the amplifier. It's very important that you disconnect from the controller before you attempt to connect to the amplifier software. They do share ports, so it's important that you disconnect from one. Sharing, I'll share. There we go. Go ahead and scan. Make sure I'm disconnected here. Well, that's strange.
You gotta love doing things live.
Yep. Move on to the next slide. That's no bueno right now. Well, what I was going to show is basically the matrixing software for the amplifier, which is allowed to you basically have full mixing control. You're presented with the 4
Yeah,
inputs of the amplifier, and then the 4 outputs, and then you have a mixing matrix for every output, essentially.
Yeah, so Ben, you should still be able to show it without going into without connecting to one, right? So just open up maybe the DSP from that. Yeah.
There we go. All right, so here we're looking at output 1, and output 1 by default has input 1 unmuted, 2, 3, and 4 muted, and then basically the same thing goes here. Input 2 by default, it's only listening to input number 2. But you do have the ability on the iOS application as well as here to do mixing. So if I had, say, a small band plugged in somewhere or whatever it may be, I could do mixing here. I could do mixing on my iPhone as well. There's a pink noise generator, and then during an override, wants to know the level for that override input. Preston, do we have any Q&A?
Perfect. Yeah, we do have a few questions that have come in here. So the first one, Ben, I think I'll toss this one to you. What devices do you have that we can integrate with SIP or VoIP integration into the system?
Sure. So for SIP, we've got the PRS-1 AIP1, which is our standard audio over IP interface. That unit can be flashed over to a SIP client. At that point, it will log into your SIP server. We have a few different ways that we can treat that. We can treat it where it's accepting DTMF tones and giving you contact closures, up to 8 contact closures based on those DTMF tones. Or we can have it where it is essentially just answering the phone and then kicking out that audio into contact closure. For something like PLENA Matrix, you could just do you could either do either way actually, with a contact closure to control when the audio comes in, or just plug it in with the other firmware, and essentially when the phone answers, it hands off that audio and contact over to PLENA Matrix. So it's 2 different ways.
Perfect. And then how can we stream music from an iOS device into one of the BGM inputs?
Sure. So for doing that, Apple makes the AirPlay devices, which can be used as an AirPlay emulator, basically, to receive that stream. Personally, I use Raspberry Pis. I have a number of them that are programmed as Apple AirPlay emulators. It's cost me $30. They sit on my network, and they just have a headphone jack output on them, and I have that plugged into my Matrix.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that's great. And I know I've kind of done the same thing a little bit, either using some of the Alexa products as well. If you've got somebody that wants to do those can also be streaming inputs from that perspective.
There's also a number of little aftermarket Bluetooth accessories that can be used as receivers.
Yeah, absolutely. So really just depending on what you want to get into the system and what you want to transmit there. Another one here, when we connect multiple call stations, we need to assign all call station IDs through dip switches. Can you clarify that step a little bit?
Yeah, every call station is going to have a dip switch on the bottom of it, and those will need to be set before they're plugged into the system. That basically gives it the addressing and the monitoring from the controller. Perfect.
And then what can we do if we have a room combining situation, right? If they have a temporary air wall that they might want to open and close from time to time as a room combining situation. Maybe preset recalls, etc.
Yeah, you can store up to 5 presets, and it's also compatible with AMX and Crestron. So you can get into some little bit more advanced routing and more obviously presets with something like an AMX or Crestron system. But the system will store 5, and with the wall controllers, you can have duplicates of wall controllers as well. So in cases where it is a large venue, you could have on one side of the venue have a wall controller for one side and the other actually, and then on the left side of the room have both controllers as well. So you would be able to control one zone from 2 controllers simultaneously. You can duplicate all of the controllers.
Perfect, and that's actually a good segue too, because you mentioned what we have with the third-party control with both Crestron and AMX there. What do we have as far as remote control for maybe simple use with iOS or iPads?
For iOS and iPads, there's a PLENA application within the App Store for that. Was that the question?
I think that's what they're getting, is what can you do within the app?
Sure. So you can't save presets. You can recall presets from there. You have full capability of all of the inputs that are for each of these zones, basically, that you've got designated. You have muting. You have global mute. You have quite a bit of control, and that can be locked down to only users. To use the system and not configure the system as well. And that iOS app, if you're looking at that, there is the ability there to configure it to only show specific areas. So if there are users that you don't want them changing the audio that's being heard in a specific zone, you can remove that zone from their control panel, and they will no longer be able to affect that zone.
Perfect. And then we do have a question. If I have an install of more than 8 zones, can I put 2 of these together via RS485? I think that's actually one I'll answer. I'm actually working at a customer site this week where we've actually got 16 zones that we have going in for an application. And what we're doing there is we're just putting 2 of the controllers separately, and honestly, we're just treating them as 2 separate mix engines, right? The wall controllers for the different rooms are connected to each one of the zones as they're needed for those. And then for what we're doing with like our phone or our SIP paging for our all calls and stuff, we're bringing that into the override input, and it goes into both controllers from that perspective. Is it compliant with NFPA 72 or UL 2572? I'll take that one as well. From that piece, I would say it's not compliant from let's say from a North America EVAC certification. We do have some other PA projects, like AJ mentioned before, that start to move up and have the additional redundancy pieces that you start looking into for what you need there. So if there's any more questions, go ahead, and I think that's pretty much most of them there. We'll hang out here for a little bit longer just in case something else comes in. What I do want to
Matrix, I can mention one more thing, which is the scheduling software. This is something that's beta right now. It's being worked on. It should be released at some point here coming up in the near future. But it's basically scheduling software for the PLENA Matrix presets, which is going to allow you to take more than just presets, but take outputs and inputs and outputs and mute them. Switch presets based on a time and a calendar event, basically. So if you're a restaurant at 3 in the morning every day, the system resets back to a mute mode. And at 6 in the morning, it changes itself back into the morning mode, where it's got a radio station playing at a certain level. Everywhere is set where the restaurant is normally opening with.
Perfect. Thanks, Ben. There is one last question. Zone combining of sorts across multiple DSPs. I would say that's not really supported in PLENA Matrix. With that, we did release last week at InfoComm the new MXE mix engine from Dynacord. With that, having more inputs, up to 24 and more outputs there as well. So that gives you a little bit more of that, let's say, that mix engine approach. Once you outgrow really what PLENA Matrix can do, that's kind of the next step up from that. So with that point, what I will mention is that we do have a whole list of sessions going on throughout this week. whether you're looking more into conferencing, public address, looking into Electro-Voice, Dynacords, speaker design, speaker layouts, and really what else is offered in the Bosch umbrella under Dynacord, Electro-Voice, RTS from Intercom. So look out for those. You should be able to sign up for those in the same email where you got the link from this. So with that, we'll hang out here for just a few more minutes in case any other questions come in. But thank you both, Ben and AJ, and also thank you all for taking a little time out of your day to spend a little time with us in our summer session here and kind of going through and getting a refresh on some of the products or being introduced to them if you weren't familiar with them from the past. So thank you.